Good day, everybody. Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider, where we learn about motorcycles as we ride. Our guest today is the Kawasaki Ninja 7 Hybrid. That is a 450cc gasoline engine paired with an electric motor to make a machine that produces about 70 horsepower and costs $12,500. So, hybrid. That's all over the world of automobiles, right? From Priuses to supercars, hybrids are practically everywhere. But in the world of motorcycling, this is a lot more experimental. And you probably have some of the same questions that I had. Like, it's electric and gas. Like, can you ride it as an electric bike? Or as a gas-only bike? Does it have a typical transmission? It says Ninja on the side. Is it fast? Does it handle well? These are all actually really good questions. And I'm excited to talk about it on the ride to work. So let's go, everybody. Okie dokie, everybody. Before we get going on this Ninja 7 Hybrid Daily Rider, a quick reminder that this video is brought to you by RevZilla. RevZilla is an e-commerce platform where you can buy parts, accessories, and apparel for motorcycles and people who love motorcycles. And every dollar you spend on RevZilla.com, a little bit of it goes into making programs like this, or the Shop Manual with Ari Henning, the High Side, Low Side podcast, or CTXP Adventures. That's all we really want you to know. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Alrighty, the Ninja 7 Hybrid. There's a lot to talk about, everybody. And I will start by saying the link in the description has an article with more information on this bike, pictures, and details of the development of the bike. So if I don't cover something, please click that article and you'll learn a little bit more. At the center here is a 451cc parallel twin that is essentially the same engine as is in the Ninja 500, though it's tuned for slightly more power at the top of the rev range, and that's because it is paired with a battery and a 9 kilowatt electric motor. So they tuned the gas engine for a little bit more power up top, I think because of the fact that there is an electric motor to help with torque, if you will. Aside from that, there are a lot of pieces on the bike that are, you know, pretty familiar. It's a standard fork. In fact, I think it's a shared fork with the Ninja 500. Of course, it has two brake rotors up front instead of one like the Ninja 500 because it's a much heavier bike, which we'll talk about more in a minute. And then it's quite a bit longer because the battery lives here under the seat. It does seem like the back wheel could be forward a little bit, just based on looking at it. But I'm not an engineer or anything. But if it looks long to you, it is 6 inches longer in wheelbase than a Ninja 500. So while it shares an engine, fork, and some parts with a Ninja 500, it is quite a bit longer and about 120 pounds heavier due to all of the electro equipment on board. But yeah, aside from that, it's a pretty typical looking sporty motorcycle, right? Basic frame structure, basic swing arm suspension structure. It's got some, you know, sort of sharp Ninja looks. Because Kawasaki is so proud of the project, they put the river mark on there. River mark is usually only used on special Kawasaki's, like supercharged ones, or I think the ZX-10 has one now. But that's kind of a big deal for a Ninja to get a river mark. There are a couple things I wanted to call out while we're here. One, crucially, is that there's no clutch lever, and there is no shift pedal. It is a semi-automatic transmission. It can be fully automatic, or you can shift up with this trigger here or shift down with this thumb paddle here, which, as I said, we'll experiment with a little bit more. But the transmission is a little weird, different than other motorcycles, I should say. And of course, how the bike operates with electric and gas is something we'll talk about while we're on the road. And I think we're just about there, right? You get the idea? It's a Ninja. It's a hybrid. It's got similar sort of full color TFT dash that you see on other motorcycles and Kawasaki's these days. So it's in sport mode, and when I press this button here, it's going to sound a little funny though, because it doesn't have a typical starter motor. It starts up kind of like a hybrid where the engine just jumps to life. There it is, everybody. 451 cc's of fury. All right, cool. Hopefully you got what you need to know before we get going here. LED lighting up front. Now we're just about ready to go, but I'm not going to pull in a clutch lever as I normally would. But instead, I'm just going to pull on this little trigger up here with my left index finger, and it's going to go from neutral to first. Click. And then I simply twist, and the clutch engages for me. And then As we accelerate, I pull again on the shifter, and it keeps on shifting. Anyways, let's talk through some specs as we normally do, and as we approach this red light we can talk about seat height, which is 31.3 inches, pretty middle of the road seat height, not particularly tall, not particularly short. At 6'2", as you can see, I got a pretty good bend in my knee. Unintimidating for 6-footers, that's for sure. The weight, on the other hand, is pretty high. As I said, about 120 pounds heavier than a Ninja 500, with a full 3.7 gallons of gas in the tank. This bike tipped the Daily Rider scales at 505 pounds. Heavier, I would say, than it looks, or than you might think. And as for horsepower, as I said, it was, I think it's 69.3 or something. Just under 70 horsepower is what's claimed, and that information, as usual, is in the description of this video. Total price, $12,500 is what it's listed at as of the publication of this video on the Kawasaki website, which, I don't know, I'm not going to spend too much time on, but I think it's cheaper than I was expecting. Feels like the kind of thing that a company would be inclined to just charge a lot for, or make people expect to pay a lot for, because it's experimental and innovative and new and blah blah blah. But $12,500, I don't think that's terrible. As for what it feels like to sit on, surprisingly reasonable. The Ninja name might make you think that it's real sporty and aggressive, but similar to the Ninja 500 and Ninja 650, Kawasaki does a pretty good job making bikes look sporty but actually feel pretty comfortable. You can see there's a fairly tall rise on the handlebar here. You know, the legroom is a little bit tight, as you'd expect from a sporty kind of bike, and you lean forward a little bit to the bars, but it's really not terribly aggressive. It definitely feels sort of like a sport touring bike or a sport naked bike or something like that. All right, as we merge out onto the freeway here, you know, the bike largely to this point feels like you're riding a Ninja 500 kind of. That's a little bit heavier. It's got reasonable power, but nothing that's gonna snap your head back or anything. But if you do want to shoot out into traffic, put on your signal here and open the throttle, and it's not quite enough, you can hit this green button here and you get e-boost. Maybe not the best use of e-boost. We'll experiment with it more later, but you can see on the screen here there is a little e-boost logo, and that gray bar at the top indicates how much electric boost you can get from the battery and electric motor while in sort of like the sport all gasoline mode. It doesn't have super bike power, to be honest, but you can get a little assist from the electric motor, which is both a little bit of a gimmick, I think, and a little bit useful. As for highway manners in general, it's pretty good at this kind of thing. Like I said, it's comfortable to sit on by and large, and there's not a ton of wind protection from this little kind of frisbee windshield. It covers my stomach from my sternum up is in the wind, but perfectly reasonable, I think. It certainly offers a lot better range than an electric bike or something like that, or it offers less range anxiety, I should say, than an electric bike, because you can always just put fuel in it and it charges the battery as you ride and offers electric power when you need it. But overall, my gas mileage figures were 45 to 50. That's not like anything to be super excited about. That was in eco mode, and I didn't do a full tank on sport mode. Presumably it'd be a little bit worse because it's using less of the electric power. But yeah, I guess I was a little underwhelmed by the overall gas mileage. Granted, I rode on the highway a lot where the electric's not helping that much, but it's still a small engine that should be pretty fuel efficient, and it's pretty common for other bikes to get, I don't know, 50 or 55 miles to the gallon that have larger engines and no electric assist. So I didn't find the hybrid range capability to be anything to shout about. I would say mostly it's useful around town, which we'll experiment with here in a minute. As for the mirrors, same thing as other Kawasaki's. They're very far away. See how, like, from my standard riding position, I can't even touch them. So the field of view is kind of small because they're so far away. Otherwise, I mean, they're mounted in a good place as far as being wide and away from the side of the bike. They're pretty smooth, but they're too far away. All right, coming down off the highway toward the neighborhood section of the route here, and I'm going to use this opportunity to switch from sport mode. Well, you'll see this e-boost available. I'm going to hold down this eco button, and you guessed it, the bike is going to switch into, where is it, baby? Off the throttle, eco mode. There we go. Still manual transmission in so much as I do it with my fingers, but now when we come to a stop, ugh, I tipped over. You heard the engine shut off. As we accelerate up this hill, the electric motor assists the gasoline engine leaving a stoplight, and in doing so removes one of the most strenuous and gas intensive parts of propelling a machine, which is moving it from a dead stop. There we go. We got a footless stop. Electric start. Pulls in the gas engine. Reach down and upshift. It's a little bit of a strange sensation. Anyone who's driven a hybrid automobile will be used to this to some extent. The vehicle shutting off when you come to a stop. It's very distracting trying to do footless stops, I'll say that. But it is, oh gosh, I messed it up. But it's pretty seamless actually, the way Kawasaki has engineered it. Aside from being strange, it's not abrupt or weird or difficult to get used to in any other way, really. It is a pretty well-mannered bike around town because of that that e-assist start. Electric bikes have famously good throttle response because you know, there's no carburation or explosions happening inside. It's just electric power moving the bike forward, and the throttle response is the same on this bike. Very smooth and gentle when you take off from a stop with in eco mode with the electric assist. For that reason, it's pretty good around town. And if you're into, you know, whatever, saving gasoline or the engineering behind the bike, you'll get a real kick out of coming to a stop and having the bike shut off like it just did. And as long as we're at this stoplight, it'll just be off and quiet. My one complaint with the electric assist when you leave a stop is that it's not particularly aggressive. Like right now I'm going to stop, let the engine shut off, and then I'm going to open the throttle. This is maximum acceleration right now. And then once the gas engine comes on, it starts to actually kind of pull. The electric system is a low voltage system as opposed to a high voltage system that you might find in a live wire or zero or a fully electric bike, because those systems can charge quickly and they can dispense energy pretty quickly. This electric system is not as aggressive because it's paired with that gas engine. Kawasaki wanted to have a longer service life, for example, and was not as concerned about the actual outright performance of the standalone electric powertrain. And that means that it can be a little soft leaving stoplights, especially when you want to rush away from a light next to a car or something like that. It doesn't hit quite as hard as I would like, to be honest. On to Lover's Lane. The passenger accommodations on the Ninja 7 Hybrid are nothing to shout about. Despite the sport touring-like wheelbase of 60 inches, it's still sort of sporty back there. And, you know, Kawasaki's straddling this line between the Ninja 7 being efficient and sensible and also being kind of like sporty. And I have more to say about that, but I think the passenger accommodations are one of those places that I'm honestly not sure what I would do if I were Kawasaki. Do you make it really comfortable for a passenger, even though it's a Ninja? Or do you not make it a Ninja? Or do you even care what passengers think? Because this bike is really just about, you know, the engineering and the platform and the experiment of it all. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it matters on this bike. More so than most. Right, into the Twisty Road section where a Ninja should shine, right? And I would say the handling on the Ninja 7 is fine. It's not bad, but it is noticeably heavy without being cumbersome, a little slow to change direction. I mean, it's a heavy bike and it's a long bike. It does feel a little bit at odds with how much power there is on tap, right? Like Kawasaki has other long, heavy bikes, but then, you know, you get a big stonking engine. Whereas with this bike, that's not really the point. Maybe that's yet again a little bit of a question mark around the Ninja branding. I don't know. I'm not saying, I'm just asking. I guess I just think it's kind of funny that this bike separates me from so much of the other stuff that I care about in motorcycling, right? Like normally, especially if you're riding a Kawasaki Ninja, you'd be talking about the suspension tuning and how the brakes feel and how it really transmits the feeling of riding a motorcycle. And it does all those things just fine. But for some reason, I find myself not really caring about that because this bike is about the powertrain and the hybrid drive thing. And if that's not interesting to you, then the rest of the motorcycle is not going to deliver in any way that any other bike won't. Right, as we come to the bottom of the twisty road here, quite a bit of traffic to get onto surface streets here, my goodness gracious. We will experiment with the automatic transmission function. I'm going to put the bike into automatic transmission, and I'm going to accelerate away from this light, and the bike's going to shift for me, and it's pretty awkward. When you have it in eco mode, in automatic transmission, it shifts very early so that it doesn't rev out very much, so it doesn't use very much gas, etc., etc. The shifting is a little bit awkward, and it's a little bit awkward even in manual mode, and I'm going to explain why. Bear with me, it's going to take a second. So the way the clutch works on this motorcycle is it's a little oil pump and a little robot in there that is basically releasing the clutch and moving the clutch as needed based on algorithms and a computer and whatnot when you accelerate. And when you shift, that's exactly what it does. It pulls in the clutch lever, it shifts, and it lets the clutch lever out. So it takes a little longer to shift than most bikes sort of normally do, especially bikes with quick shifters. Like Honda's e-clutch system on their CB and CBR 650s do the same thing with the clutch. There's a little robot that operates the clutch basically, but when you go to upshift, and if you want to, you can do it manually with your own hand, or you can pull up on a typical foot shifter on a motorcycle. And what that does is engage a quick shifter, which cuts ignition briefly and allows the bike to pop into the next gear, which is a very smooth and relatively seamless way to shift. But the Ninja 7 doesn't do that. It pulls in a clutch, shifts, and lets the clutch out every single time it executes a shift. And that means that it can be a little bit awkward, even when you trigger it yourself, but especially in automatic mode when, of course, you're not in charge of when the shift happens, so you're just sort of like waiting for it. And that's very much unlike what it feels like to use a quick shifter, as I said, or even Honda's own dual clutch transmission, which is on NC750 and Gold Wings and Africa Twins. Because it has a dual clutch in there, it's much quicker and more seamless shift, whereas this is sort of like a conventional gearbox being operated by a robot that has been trained to shift but doesn't have a lot of miles under its belt, it feels like sometimes. Here we go, eco mode. It always like rocks me back and forth a little bit. You can probably hear it, right? You can hear this sort of like root, doot, doot as it shifts, instead of that really, really quick pop that you get from a quick shifter or an actual dual clutch system. All right, approaching this red light, we'll talk about brakes. I'm going to jump on the binders here. It slows down quite well. It, like I said, has, you know, a much bigger braking system than Ninjas of a similar size because it is heavy. And I'm really glad that Kawasaki did that because, you know, having good brakes is important. All right, I suppose we could talk a little about the dash. We should do that because it's kind of interesting. Of course, we have all these controls over here that I've been using to switch from eco to sport and vice versa. This is the EV mode, which we'll talk about in a minute, automatic and manual transmission toggles. And then this is that e-boost button I used on the freeway, which we'll use as we leave the stoplight as well, which, speaking of which, I should put it over into sport mode, which is going to start the motorcycle. And then I'm going to hold down on this e-boost for a second, and then you can see the bike is ready to boost. A couple other little interesting tidbits. This EV HEV circle up here is basically telling you how much life is in the battery. If you run the bike for a while on EV only mode, it will start to drain this little battery meter kind of thing. And we'll experiment with EV mode in a little while here. Other than that, pretty basic systems here. You got range meter, trip meters, fuel gauge, that kind of thing. Fuel gauge for the battery and for the gas. Here we go, e-boost. Ah! It's pretty zippy when you put the e-boost on from a start in sport mode. That's the electric motor and the gasoline engine working in tandem. And, you know, 70 claimed horsepower, right? So it's not KTM Super Duke fast or anything, but it does have a long wheelbase and it does not want to wheelie. It just wants to move forward. And it moves forward with some urgency, I'll say. It's kind of fun. So sometimes during this section I ask, would you buy this bike just for the engine? And I had such an interesting discussion about the Ninja 7, right? Because it is basically a Ninja 500 parallel twin in there, which is, in my opinion, one of the least interesting engines that you can buy in the world of motorcycling. Fun, playful, enough power, but nothing special, really. But combined with this whole, you know, electric motor thing and hybrid thing, I find it fascinating. I do. I think some people out there are going to think it's really interesting, and they're going to buy one, and they're going to get such a kick out of the whole powertrain, the gas engine shutting off at a stoplight like their Volkswagen Golf does or whatever. And I think that's fair, because I think it's interesting. I really like that. And if you bought the bike just to experiment with that, and just because you live in a city and you want the capability and the versatility that the powertrain offers, I wouldn't blame you. But as for thrills per mile, I don't know. I can't say that the Ninja 7 really like is going to blow your hair back in a way that a gas bike just can't match or anything like that. All right, one thing I forgot to talk about was this ALPF. You see that there? Down at the bottom, ALPF under the 1. I can make it disappear if I hold down this button. That's automatic launch position finder, maybe. Is that right? What that basically signifies is that when you come to a stop, it will automatically shift down to first gear. So if you're in 4th gear, you just come to a stop, you don't touch the shifter at all, it'll automatically bring the bike down to first gear. So how do we encapsulate this ride in one fell swoop? I mean, I guess to go back to some of the questions we asked early on, it says Ninja on the side. Is it fast? Kinda, yeah. I mean, it's a rush when you hit the e-boost and you rev it up. Like, it's gonna be surprising and fun if you're coming from a car. If you're coming from another sport bike or whatever, naked sport bike or any kind of motorcycle with 100 horsepower or more or something like that, then it's not really gonna do anything for you. And I think that might be the thing that I find the most odd about the Ninja 7. Well, 2 things. One, calling it a Ninja. I just can't quite get on board with that, because I don't think it feels enough like a Ninja. Do I understand why Kawasaki called it a Ninja? Yeah, it's the most famous brand within Kawasaki. It's like calling Ford's electric car a Mustang Mach-E, which I think is an abomination, because not that it's not a good car, I just don't think it's a Mustang. Same thing here. It's just, I don't feel like this is a Ninja. It feels like this is a, I don't know, something else. Something new is what it is. And the other thing is the transmission, which I feel like is kind of a miss. It's a little too awkward and archaic to feel as modern as this powertrain is. And I think that's sort of too bad. And for what it's worth, on the topic of the transmission, below 15 miles an hour, if you hold down this EV button, you can switch it into EV mode. And now it is in EV mode. It will shift, same as it does in gas mode, and it won't go more than 40 or 45 miles an hour in this mode, but you can ride it around and you have some pretty decent amount of range. You can theoretically, in fact, run the bike all the way out of gasoline and then just use the battery to get where you need to go. Not that I would recommend that. But this does offer, in my opinion, amazing versatility. And I mean, just like unheard of versatility, as far as the bike being quiet and having different power modes, basically. How does it do on a dirt road, you ask? Well, let's see. We're in EV mode. The EV motor is not particularly strong. Like, here we go. This is max acceleration in EV mode. Nothing that's going to really surprise anybody. I'm going to switch it back to HEV mode. I'm going to go to Sport. Here, we're going to try an e-boost and see if we can get this sucker to spin. That was pretty fun. Pretty fun, everybody. You can see, I mean, the difference between accelerating with just the gas engine and then the e-boost. It spools up and goes a little crazy, which is pretty fun, I gotta say. But not unruly. And that's another thing that I feel like it's worth calling out, because I've complained a couple times along this ride about how it doesn't have as much power as I'm used to, or if you really want power, it's not going to blow your hair back, blah, blah, blah. The truth is, motorcycles are so much faster than they need to be, right? And we're all kind of addicted to that. And that's fine. You know, it's fun, but we don't need it. And I appreciate what the Ninja 7 has is enough power to shoot up an on-ramp, to get on the freeway, to have fun. but it doesn't have enough power to do a wheelie, for example, which is why we're not doing a wheelie right now. And maybe that's another reason I struggle with the Ninja. Like, you have a Kawasaki Ninja that won't do a wheelie? I so appreciate that it's not overkill in a way that most motorcycles are, and yet I have a piece of my heart that still wants that. Hopefully you don't blame me too much for that. So can you back it in? Not really, no. You can like kinda, it's got ABS, and you don't have a ton of control over the clutch and transmission, so that's not really what it's best at, if we're being honest. Okay, pulling into the parking lot at work here, and as we get down below 15 miles an hour, switching it to electric mode for our cruise through the parking lot. I've been doing this as I get home too. When I pull into my neighborhood, I just switch it to EV mode. I pull into my driveway nice and quiet, don't bug the neighbors. I kind of like it. Okie dokie, U-turn test on a sporty looking bike with a 60-inch wheelbase and 500 pounds on board. How are we gonna do? We only have 2 parking spaces. I don't love our chances here based on my experience with this. So I'm gonna start here along this one, and we're gonna go full lock left, and then we're gonna try to make it, not even close. No, that's gonna be like 3 parking spaces. And the reason I was pessimistic about this is as I pushed it in and out of my garage, I've noticed that the turning radius is not great. Good parking lot manners because of the electric mode. The chassis, because it's long and heavy, in some ways not ideal. There you are, parked, EV mode. Quiet as you like. Pretty cool machine. I'm not going to rev up the engine. You know what a Ninja 500 sounds like. I don't need to do that. Let's talk about some of your questions here. Where are we going? What are we doing? Okay, first question is from Saucy Jazz is Dead, who says, would this be a good second bike for someone who has only owned electric bikes but dreams of riding beyond city lines? This is exactly the question that Kawasaki PR wanted someone to ask. So I'll answer it, which is, yeah, I think so. You know, if you like electric bikes, but you feel hemmed in by range anxiety, whatever, then yeah, this is something. I think that theoretically in the future, there could be more situations where there are urban areas where only electric vehicles are allowed. But you still want to be able to go beyond that area and, you know, ride a twisty road and then come home and put it back in EV mode and legally ride through the center of the city. So, you know, a lot of it is theoretical, but yes, I think you need to be the type of person who is fascinated by, intrigued, and sort of tickled by the engineering that's built into this bike. Something other than the outright capability. Let's put it that way. The next question is from Ronald Gurkus, who says, does it feel like it will need to be improved through future iterations, or is it already good? Yes and yes. It is already good. It works, but it does need to be improved. Yeah, it does. The transmission thing, they got to sort something out there. I think you just put a foot shifter on it and you let people use a quick shifter because that's satisfying and fun and works well. And then you just have an e-clutch built in, a la the Honda 650s. And then you give the electric engine just a little more pop. We need a little more pop from that electric engine because it can be so satisfying. And then I think you're kind of getting there. I also question just pairing it with the 650 engine because the 650 engine's not a lot less efficient than the 450, I don't think. And you'd get more out of it. But then maybe you got to charge more and it gets bigger and it gets heavier. So, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, thanks for the question. Next question is from Sizwivi, who says, would turbocharging have perhaps achieved the same result with less complexity and similar fuel economy plus performance? If you listen to High Side, Low Side, you know that I've been on about turbos for quite some time now, and Spurgeon Dunbar has had it up to his eyeballs with all my turbo talk. I do think there's something there. I do think that you could potentially turbocharge. I think it's a lot harder to control and more moving parts, more maintenance, that kind of thing. Electric vehicles have done a pretty good job proving that they're relatively low maintenance. So it's a tit for tat. But when I said earlier that I like companies experimenting with this kind of stuff, a turbo is a perfect example of this. I would love it if Kawasaki built a Ninja 500 turbo, right? Charge $12,500 for that. And it would have 75 horsepower and get 50 miles to the gallon. That does seem possible, doesn't it? Cool. Glad we're on the same page. All right. Somebody make the petition. We'll send it around and sign it. Next question is from That Angry Walrus, who says, is this bike more Toyota Prius or more Porsche 918 Spyder? Basically, does the hybrid system feel like it's for efficiency or performance? And this is where the branding loses me a little bit, right? Because Kawasaki's like, it has the acceleration of a 1000cc sport bike, and it has the, efficiency of a Kawasaki Ninja 250 from 15 years ago. I feel like it probably should be one or the other, right? I think the Ninja branding and the sport bike looks and the whole thing where you can combine the electric power and the gasoline power and you can accelerate quickly and it has a long wheelbase and blah, blah, blah. That is sort of performance oriented, right? But then when you ride the bike, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's meant to be efficient and sensible. And I think those two things being at odds with each other is a little bit of a struggle for me and will be a struggle for other people too. So I think to answer your question, it's trying to be both, and I don't know that it achieves that. Is it a good idea to brand it as a Ninja? Because then people are like, oh, sick, a Ninja. Probably, unfortunately, yeah, it probably is a good idea to do that. But I can't get behind it because I don't think that's what this bike is at its core. Next question is from Super1012, who says, why do we even need an electric or hybrid motorcycle? Even large displacement ones get 40 miles per gallon. Some smaller ones get 50, 60, 70. They have always been economical. This is a good question. Why do this when motorcycles are already getting pretty good gas mileage? On the one hand, I agree. I'm not sure why. On the other hand, I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about it is that it feels like the automotive industry often leads the way. Lead the way with ABS, with other safety systems, with the way that the vehicles are put together. And I think motorcycling can learn from that. And Kawasaki's trying to do that. And I appreciate that. The last thing I'll say is when the BMW GS came out in 1981 model year, BMW said it's a cross between a road bike and a dirt bike. Get it? And lots of people said, what the heck are you doing? Why would I want a huge, heavy dirt bike or a tall, spindly, cumbersome, weird street bike? It doesn't make any sense. Why would I want that? And here we are 40-something years later, and adventure bikes are all the rage, right? And I am not saying that this is going to be a revolution, and in decades we will look back at this as this shining beacon of engineering. But I do like it when brands experiment with this kind of thing, and I think that it's possible that it will shine a light on a corner of motorcycling that we didn't know we wanted. I think that's what experiments are for, and that's why they're good. Last question here is from Medium Enduro, who says, which Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle would choose the Kawasaki Ninja Hybrid and why? Well, I'm not as up to date on my Ninja Turtles as I once was. I remember I had a pretty wicked sweater back in my mullet days, my elementary school days with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on it. Boy, that was a cool sweater. Anyway, it's got to be Donatello, right? Donatello's the sort of like nerdy one. Raphael's he's too moody. He's not a hybrid motorcycle rider, Rafa. Leonardo's a sensible one, I suppose. But no, that's not the right fit. And then Michelangelo, he's a little too wacky, right? Michelangelo's a ZX-10 guy. Whatever. It's got to be Donatello. Correct me if I'm wrong, of course. But that's what I'm going with. Purple mask. Donatello. Good kid. Tries hard. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I got a lot of really, really good ones. I had trouble picking the ones to answer, so I appreciate that. And, of course, stick with me. We're going to put this sucker on the Daily Rider leaderboard right now.
Hello, everybody. All right. Here we are at the Daily Rider leaderboard. We are at the third bike of 2025, if you've been keeping track. Pretty simple. As it stands right now, you got the Yamaha MT-09 at the top there, and the little Honda Dax Mini Moto, which is actually right here next to me, second on the leaderboard. So we have the Kawasaki Ninja 7 Hybrid ready to go. And it's probably gonna be a fairly short discussion of where it lands. Is it as good as a Honda Dax 125? Well, the fuel mileage isn't as good on the hybrid, oddly, maybe. But it is, more capable. You go on the highway, you go 80 miles an hour if you want to, and it certainly has some features, aside from the hybrid drive thing, that are more conventionally capable as a motorcycle than an actual mini bike. So I think it's probably gonna be here, though the Dax is a sweetheart and got a smiley face and is, $4,000 or whatever. That's, says something, but a little bit of a knife to a gunfight. Is the Kawasaki Ninja 7 Hybrid better than an MT-09 as a daily rider? MT-09's kind of a standard bearer, right? 2025 bike, It's got some flaws that we talked about during the ride, which are unfortunate, but ultimately it is an awfully capable motorcycle that has sort of edged its way into almost luxury, certainly a bit of a flagship for the Yamaha brand. And you know, it's fast, it's punchy, it works well, it's exciting, not hugely expensive, all that jazz. Is the exciting future of motorcycling better, or is the exciting past motorcycling better? I'm gonna go with the MT-09 over the Ninja 7 Hybrid. I just think that, you know, push comes to shove, the MT-09's mileage is not much worse, and if you're after excitement, it's, I think, undeniably more exciting. Same size gas tank, I believe, so you're liable to get a little less range out of the MT-09, but again, efficiency, range, words like that might not be super high on your docket if you're buying an MT-09, and I think that's fair. We got a rounded out podium now for 2025. We got an MT-09, a Ninja 7 Hybrid, and a Honda DAX 125. I think it's only fair to talk about where the Ninja 7 Hybrid might finish in past years here within the other 100 episodes. So 2024 board, let's say here, is the Ninja 500 SE better than a Ninja 7 Hybrid as a daily rider? Everybody at Kawasaki, plug your ears. Here's the part you're not gonna. I think the Ninja 500 is just sort of, it just sort of makes more sense. Is it like outright as fast away from a stop? No, it's not, because bike makes more power. As the e-boost assist thing, certainly there's a little more performance as you shoot away from a stoplight or like roll on the gas to make a pass on the highway, undeniably. The Ninja 500 benefits from a lot of development, a long line of blending simplicity and fun and affordability. New innovative machines like the Ninja 7 are going to struggle to match bikes that have been in development for a long time. I think there's some teething issues here that we talked about. So anyway, Ninja 7, I think, be down the way a little bit there. There's some real blockades on paper, like weight and performance and price, that practically the charm and the innovation of the bike create some light and some energy, but maybe not enough to really overcome my own personal sense of a kind of enjoyment and recommendability, if that's a word. I would like to give a formal tip of the cap to Kawasaki for creating that bike. I am very excited about it. I think that it has some legs as a concept. I would love to see more companies try to do the same thing, or Kawasaki to keep developing the idea. Am I okay with trying out a turbo? Yup, I'm okay with it. I'm just saying I'm okay with it. I'll be excited about that too. I hope you had fun here on another ride to work. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you next time on Daily Rider. See you, everybody.
Whoa, what is that? It's a homemade Goldwing canopy. Very interesting. Would like to know more.